On a December day in 2010, a produce vendor in Tunisia stood in front of a government office and set himself on fire, killing himself. His desperate actions helped spark a revolutionary uprising that has come to be known as the Arab Spring. While the uprising across the Middle East and North Africa did not take place during a specific calendar season, they were commonly referred to as the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring timeline began in Tunisia, a country that had been under the allegedly corrupt and authoritarian rule of President Zayn al-Abidine Ben Ali for more than 2 decades. Bouazizi became a martyr who inspired others who were suffering from unemployment at the hands of a corrupt government. His death sparked a Tunisian revolution in which protesters armed themselves not only with signs, but with cell phones, allowing the protest to spread at social media speed. On January 11th, a week after Bouazizi's death, Tunisia's government fell apart, and the disgraced president Ben Ali fled the country. The videos of the successful uprising shared via social media raised global awareness of the protests themselves. State-run news organizations were barely able to keep up. The speed and success of the protest inspired others across the region. Throughout January, protests erupted in Algeria, Jordan, and Oman. By January 25th, the movement reached Egypt, followed by Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Libya, and several other countries. On February 11th, the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak stepped down, and by the end of the year, Yemen's government was overthrown, as was Libya's, ending the dictatorship and the life of their leader, Muammar Gaddafi, who was captured and killed by Libyan rebel militia. While some of the Arab Spring protests did result in regime changes, not all of them brought about positive change for the working class people like Mohamed Bouazizi. In some cases, the uprisings were co-opted by religious extremists like ISIS, who embraced the revolt against secular Arab regimes for their own agenda. As a result, when governments toppled in places like Syria and Iraq, rebel groups stepped in to fill the void, using strong-arm tactics and even terrorism.
And staying with the Arab Spring, now let's get some more analysis and insight from journalist, author, F. William Engdahl, live from Frankfurt. Thank you for coming on the program today. Of course, we are aware you are the author of the book, Full Spectrum Dominance, Totalitarian Democracy in the New World Order. Let's start with Tunisia. We just heard from Irina Golushko in Cairo. She touched down on the issue of Tunisia. Nearly 12 months since President Ben Ali was forced to flee the country after the revolt there. What has been achieved since then? Are the Tunisians happy with the revolution and the results forthwith?
Well, quite obviously, the Tunisians are not happy. The economy is a disaster since the uprisings a year ago. Tunisia was picked as the first in a series of dominoes in a very carefully planned destabilization strategy that was planned out more than a decade ago in the Pentagon and by the RAND Corporation and others in Washington to redraw the map, essentially, of the Middle East. It was and it's not intended to stabilize or bring democracy to any of these countries, as your correspondent in Cairo just pointed out.
They have crossed a mountain on foot in the desert heat, forced to flee their homes, driven by their fear of ISIS. This woman says militants beheaded several men in her village and mounted their heads on the hoods of cars. ISIS is well armed, but sheer terror may be their most powerful weapon. Crucifixions, men tied together and marched to their deaths, shot in the head, others buried alive, according to one Iraqi minister. Atrocities documented by the militants themselves and shared with the world on social media, sending a chilling message: we take no prisoners.
The latest UN report details ISIL killings and gruesome public spectacles. People shot, beheaded, bulldozed, burned alive and thrown off buildings, and thousands held as slaves. The victims include government and public officials, doctors and lawyers, journalists and tribal and religious leaders, even women and children, anyone opposed to their ideology.
And on the battlefield in northern Iraq, ISIS is murdering entire villages. Holly Williams is there.
In once peaceful farmland, these men showed us what they say is a mass grave.
How many bodies are buried here?
Eyewitnesses told us ISIS killed at least 50 Yazidi men here. And though we cannot verify what's buried under this mound, they told us the men were shot one by one and their shallow grave covered in dirt.
Did you know these men?
They were all from my village, said Naif Ibrahim Hoda. He believes his uncle and two of his cousins lie dead beneath the soil.
How did you survive?
We left in the early morning before ISIS arrived, he told us. Later on, they blocked the road and everyone else was captured. The Yazidis were hounded from their homes by ISIS in August, fleeing to nearby Mount Sinjar, where they faced starvation.
Millions of Muslims around the world are awaiting the appearance of an Islamic Messiah, known as the Mahdi or the 12th Imam. Various branches of Islam have differing beliefs about the Mahdi. Shiite Muslims, for example, believe their savior was once alive but disappeared and will emerge a second time from this well, located in a small village in Iran. Sunni Muslims also believe in a savior, but they believe the Mahdi is Muhammad's successor and is yet to come to earth. Author Joel Richardson has written several books on how Islamic beliefs relate to biblical prophecy, and his research suggests that the Mahdi of the Muslims and the Antichrist spoken of in the Bible are the same person. In his book, Mideast Beast, Richardson argues that the Antichrist will come from the Middle East and not from Europe, as has been widely taught by many modern prophecy teachers.
For more on this, author Joel Richardson is now joining us. Well, let's get right into it, Joel. You say the Mahdi is the Antichrist. Why do you say that?
Well, when you look at Islamic tradition, sacred tradition, as they describe their primary Messiah figure, the Mahdi, there's numerous striking similarities to what the Bible describes with regard to the Antichrist. They believe he'll rule for a period of 7 years. They believe he'll rule specifically from Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. They believe he'll be a religious, military, political leader that will cause Islam to be supreme throughout the world. Filled with anti-Semitism, anti-Christ, anti-Christian spirit and doctrine. It's amazing how the two concepts, messianic concepts, really line up in I call it an anti-parallel.
What would you think it would take for that person to unify the two camps and for people to acknowledge him just in the Muslim community?
Success. It's that simple. If a Muslim leader is able to unify large segments of the Islamic world and show success, then Muslims will get behind him. And of course, from a biblical perspective, we know that in the last days there's going to be lying signs and wonders. The Antichrist, the false prophet, will do these things. You get that type of grassroots movement behind an individual. The potential, as I said, for a massive movement throughout the Islamic world is tremendous.
How can a Mahdi, a Muslim Messiah, how could he bring the whole world under his sway?
Well, first of all, I don't know that he's going to necessarily bring every single last nation under his sway. The scriptures are clear that there will be nations that will be at war with the Antichrist till the very end. So a lot of people talk about him having this global rule. I think it's going to be a massive rule. I think throughout the world right now, you have Muslims in every nation, some nations much more than others. I think if the Muslim majority nations of the world were unified together, that alone would be enough to fulfill the prophecies of the Bible. But you throw in some wild cards, you throw in wars and so many other things, and I think that Islam is uniquely custom tailor-made to fulfill that which the prophets were speaking about, whether geographically, whether theologically, whether it's their anti-Semitism, whether it's their numbers. In so many ways, I think that we can say that this is that beginning to emerge right before us.
Of our Prophet ﷺ, because no one could ever have predicted this, is the rise of a race that was considered to be a backward race. And this is the race of the Atrak, the Turks, the Atrak. Our Prophet ﷺ prophesied that this race would become dominant and that they would conquer the Arabs.
Turkish president openly criticizes Trump and its policies, still we never heard a single word from Trump against Turkey. Why is that? Is Turkey that powerful? Most powerful weapon of Turkey is its geographical location. Turkey is located between Asia and Europe and it acts as a gateway between them. Both America and Russia want Turkey to be on its side to control the trade between Asia and Europe. A natural strait known as Bosphorus is an internationally significant waterway located in northwestern Turkey. It acts as continental boundary between Europe and Asia. Ships had to pass through this strait in order to trade between Europe and Asia. Gross domestic product, GDP, of Turkey is almost $800 billion in 2019, which ranks it at 17th position in the world. Despite not being a nuclear state, Turkey's military is one of the strongest armies in the world. By quantity, Turkey's military holds 8th position in the world. Being a member of NATO, no country can directly damage its army. If a country attacks Turkey, it had to fight with NATO members which include America and United Kingdom. Turkey holds the second largest military after America in NATO. Total personnel, 1,408,075. Active personnel, 335,000. Reserve personnel, 380,000. Tank strength, 3,200. Armed fighting vehicles, 9,500. Air strength, 1,067. Fighter aircraft, 207. Naval strength, 196. Submarines, 12. Turkey manufactures F-16 with assistance from America. Turkey bought the S-400 missile system from Russia to strengthen its defense system.
Şimdi biliyorsunuz size bir sürprizimiz var demiştik.
Büyükşehir Belediye Başkan adayımız.
I thank the candidate at Izmir Town Hall. For 11 years, my dear friend was Minister of Transport. And it is thanks to him that this meeting took place, and I thank him for making it possible to meet you using this hologram. I thank him very much.
Yürekten teşekkür ediyorum.
President Erdogan. He's the long-serving leader of Turkey, a controversial president known for towing the line between democratic and dictatorial. Under his leadership, Turkey has become a regional powerhouse and one of the most controversial of the United States NATO allies. President Erdogan rose to political prominence as the mayor of Istanbul. While in office, his party was declared unconstitutional, and he was imprisoned for inciting violence for the reading of a politically charged Islamic poem. Locking up dissidents for speech is a theme that would return in his life. But later, he would be on the other side. Back then, his plight caught the eye of Turkey's Muslims, some of whom felt oppressed by years of secular military rule in the country. After his release, Erdogan formed the AKP, a conservative political party. And in 2002, he became the prime minister of Turkey in a landslide election. He pulled Turkey out of poverty. There was talk of the country joining the European Union. Erdogan filled that office for more than a decade. And for those 10 years, he began to enact more conservative and authoritarian policies. He cracked down on protesters, imprisoned journalists, and reversed some of Turkey's secular laws. In 2014, his own party's rules prevented him from seeking another term. So he ran for president. Before Erdogan, that office was mostly ceremonial. But there were concerns that Erdogan had become too powerful. In 2016, the military attempted a coup. But it failed to remove Erdogan from power. He blamed the coup attempt on the Gulen movement, a rival religious faction in Turkey whose leader is in exile in the United States. Gulen denied any role in the coup, but it didn't stop Erdogan from undergoing a massive purge in the government. Hundreds of people died in the violence, and thousands of military members were detained. After that, Erdogan made moves to beef up his role. In a close vote in a referendum, he lengthened the president's term in office, eliminated the office of prime minister, and curbed parliament's powers. It was denounced by critics as a blatant power grab. Erdogan was re-elected again in 2018, making him the longest-serving Turkish leader ever.
Just days after Turkey shot down a Russian jet, Russia's defense ministry accused Turkey of taking part in the ISIS oil trade. Russian officials released photographs showing thousands of tanker trucks headed from ISIS-controlled areas into Turkish territory. But Turkey's president has said that these accusations are slanderous and that he will resign if they are true. By the end of 2014, ISIS was believed to control more than half of Syria's oil fields and several more in Iraq, according to a former CIA counterterrorism officer, by using Kurdish territory to move the oil into Turkey. Although it's difficult to determine where the oil ends up, it's believed to make a stop in the city of Adana in southeast Turkey, which is home to what is called the BTC oil pipeline. But what is perhaps more complicated is that Turkey's president and his family are deeply intertwined in the country's state-owned energy services, including the oil port in Adana. Turkish intelligence services have also been accused of using Adana to transfer weapons disguised as humanitarian aid to terrorist cells in Syria in early 2014.
Turkey is the main consumer of the oil stolen from its rightful owners, Syria and Iraq. According to information we've received, the senior political leadership of the country, President Erdogan and his family, are involved in this criminal business.
8,500 tankers involved in transporting 200,000 barrels of oil towards Turkey, at least, and crossing freely the Turkish border. And that brings, as Russian military say, about $2 billion to the Islamic State.
Tonight, the Obama administration is scrambling to hold together the coalition of Arab countries battling ISIS, after Vice President Biden was forced to apologize to two key Arab allies for comments he made questioning their commitment to stop the terror group.
Our allies in the region were our largest problem in Syria.
His critical comments about Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar came during a recent speech at Harvard.
They poured hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of tons of weapons into anyone who would fight against Assad, except that the people who were being supplied were al-Nusra and al-Qaeda and the extremist elements of jihadis coming from other parts of the world.
Officials admit that while Biden was undiplomatic, he wasn't entirely wrong. Sources say competing agendas among allies in the volatile region has allowed money and weapons to end up in the hands of extremists. Biden also gave voice to U.S. criticism. Turkey has allowed foreign fighters to cross the border into Syria to join ISIS.
I wanted to bring your attention to a very important, underreported story that the White House is being extremely silent on. It's the story about an American journalist who was disappeared and murdered in Turkey on October 19th, 2014. Her name was Serena Shim. She was an American journalist working for Press TV inside of Turkey, and she uncovered how United Nations World Food Program trucks were being used by ISIS to send in and import weapons and other supplies to the Syrian rebels. The story had huge repercussions for the U.S. ally Turkey. Right after her reporting, Serena talked about death threats and threats from Turkish intelligence she got right after her report. Turkish intelligence, days before she died, accused her of being a spy, questioned her contacts and friends, and said that she would be arrested on sight when they found her. On October 19, 2014, Serena was driving on a one-way, three-lane highway with a medium. A cement truck hit her car head-on. The Turkish government says that this was an accident and has not provided any evidence or photos of the actual incident, and they have actually been changing their stories of what actually happened to Serena. After the accident, it was reported that Serena and another driver were alive. The other driver was taken to a hospital while Serena was taken to an undisclosed location where 30 minutes later she was found in a hospital dead from heart failure. The family went to Turkey to get answers from the Turkish government, and they have not gotten any assistance or help from that government. The United States government, when questioned about Serena Shim, said that they do not investigate deaths of Americans in other countries, even though they have done so in the past. The Turkish government, for some reason, posted her passport online after her death. The family does not believe her death was an accident in any way, shape, or form. The mainstream media inside the United States has been completely silent. The White House has been completely silent. The government is giving no answers and will not investigate the death of this American brave journalist who is investigating and exposing the very fact that our ally is helping, aiding, and supporting ISIS.
In the northern Syrian town of Qamishli this week, 3 car bombs in a single day. At least 5 people died, more than 20 were injured. For the Kurds who've spent half a decade fighting ISIS on the West's behalf, there is no doubt this was the work of Islamic State sleeper cells. The organisation is making a comeback that threatens us all. General Mazloum Kabani is the most senior official in this Kurdish region of Syria, an ally of the West and a man who now feels let down. He told Sky News that Turkey's recent incursion into the area is undoing everything he and the Western coalition have achieved.
The danger of the resurgence of ISIS is very big, and it's a serious danger. I think there are many people who don't know this, but it's true. The Turkish aggression opened the space and provided hope for ISIS members. And the cities that Turkey entered will be a base for ISIS to reform itself.
And he made an extraordinary allegation against a NATO member country. He claimed that not only was Turkey allowing ISIS to return, it is encouraging it.
So this is a very serious allegation. You're suggesting that a NATO member is actively encouraging ISIS to return to an area that you and the coalition removed them from. Is that right?
Yes, it's a big allegation and there's evidence of it. Many people know it. Not just ISIS members, but also former members of al-Nusra and al-Qaeda fighters who we fought against in 2013 and 2014.
Over 250 people are dead and thousands of military members have been arrested in an attempted coup against Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Though he was on vacation at the time, Erdogan reached the media through FaceTime and urged his supporters into the streets of Ankara and Istanbul. Now, the increasingly authoritarian president is likely to use the botched coup attempt as pretext to continue consolidating power. We don't know yet who is behind the plot, but a faction within the military issued a statement saying that they sought to, quote, reinstate constitutional order, human rights, and freedom. Since Turkey's founding, the military has seen itself as defenders of the secular and democratic principles of Kemalism. So, whenever the nation's political order was challenged, the military would intervene. Erdogan is blaming the latest coup attempt on Gulenists, the followers of exiled Sunni cleric Fethullah Gulen, who now lives in Pennsylvania. Once an ally to Erdogan, Gulen's media outlets have accused the president of corruption, and in response, Erdogan seized Gulen's media assets and labeled his sizable political party a terrorist movement. Now, Erdogan is calling for the US to arrest and extradite Gulen, who in turn alleges that Erdogan himself staged the whole thing. And he's been criticized for allowing Turkey's southern border with Syria to remain porous. This has made Turkey an entry point for ISIS fighters. The European Union may have some leverage to encourage reform, since Turkey has long sought to join the Union. But Turkey's political stability is vital. Europe depends on Erdogan to help manage the ongoing Syrian refugee crisis. And the US uses air bases there to stage bombing raids against ISIS in Syria. But right now, Turkey's first order of business will be to re-establish political order. Early indications from Erdogan and his allies suggest his methods will not be democratic in nature.
The military coup in Turkey is over, and President Erdogan's crackdown is in full swing. As of this writing, the government has already detained over 10,000 servicemen, among them more than 100 generals and admirals. Another 8,000 police officers have been sacked, and nearly 3,000 judges and prosecutors have been dismissed. Furthermore, roughly 15,000 officials from the educational ministry and about 23,000 teachers have lost their jobs. The list is still expanding, but thus far, Erdogan's purge has affected nearly 60,000 people.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has claimed a narrow victory in a referendum to expand presidential powers. With almost all of the 47.5 million votes counted, the country's election watchdog called the victory for the Yes campaign, which won about 51%. The result would replace Turkey's parliamentary democracy with an all-powerful presidency, meaning that Erdogan could stay in office until 2029. The position of Prime Minister would also be scrapped. Turkey's two main opposition parties said they would challenge the results, saying illegal acts occurred during voting.
In 1924, after World War I, a peace treaty was signed between the Ottoman Empire and war-victorious countries, which is known as the Treaty of Lausanne. Treaty of Lausanne defined the borders of modern-day Turkey, it ended caliphate system, and 40 new countries came into existence after the Treaty of Lausanne. Main points of the treaty were: all personal belonging of caliph was captured and he was sent on exile. Caliphate system put to an end. Turkey was declared a secular state. Oil drilling was banned for Turkey. Bosporus, a natural strait in Turkey, is declared as international, which means Turkey cannot impose taxes on ships that passes through the strait. Terms of the Treaty of Lausanne is for 100 years and will expire in 2023. After 2023, Turkey will enter a new era by drilling its own oil and imposing taxes on ships passing through Bosporus.
Turkey is undergoing a building boom, and leading the charge is the Turkish government, with a $400 billion spending spree. In return, the government expects a modernized infrastructure while creating thousands of new jobs. Among the mega projects is the new $25 billion Istanbul airport. The annual passenger capacity of the airport is expected to be 150 million, making it the world's largest.
Turkey is the world's most strategically important geographically located country in the world. As we know from the history as well, it has always been a barrier and a bridge between the two continents, Europe and Asia.
And then there is what the Turkish president calls a crazy project. The $10 billion plan will include the construction of a 45-kilometer canal parallel to the Bosphorus Strait that divides Europe and Asia. The aim is to reduce shipping traffic through the Bosphorus and minimize risks and dangers, particularly those associated with tankers. Back on land, this is said to be Europe's longest rail network, stretching 10,000 kilometers. This $45 billion high-speed train project will spread all across the country. And this addition to the Istanbul suburban rail network, called the Marmara, passes under the Bosphorus Strait in 4 minutes. Its price tag, just over $5 billion. Also being built is a financial center in the heart of Istanbul. The $5 billion project takes inspiration from New York's Wall Street. Turkey also aims to become a regional energy hub. Once this $10 billion pipeline is built, it will be used to transfer natural gas from Azerbaijan to consumers in Europe.
The Turkish government says it's guiding the nation towards a path of long-term economic growth. And one of its main strategies is the development and modernization of the country's infrastructure. Here in Istanbul, wherever you look, it's hard to miss one of these mega structures.
There have been concerns about some of these ambitious projects, but after being elected as Turkey's first executive president on June 24, hopes are high that President Erdogan will be able to push these mega projects through.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan is selected as the first president of Turkey. This will also have an importance on catching the interest of the FDIs and foreign investors.
And President Erdogan's projections are pretty optimistic.
Türkiye, dünyanın en büyük 10 ekonomisi arasına girmeyi hedeflediğimiz 2023 vizyonumuzu adım adım hayata geçiriyoruz.
But only time will tell if all these investments are enough to take Turkey into the top 10 by 2023, the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Turkish Republic.
what Erdogan's vision is? Because people are saying that Recep Erdogan wants to essentially recreate the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Can you show us?
Exactly. Let's take a look at the Ottoman Empire as it expanded over the centuries. And you're going to see it starting in 1300, and watch how it ends up in the year about 1700. Massive. So you see it covers here all of North Africa, the Middle East, Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Libya, where they're getting involved now, and all of the Balkans. So this is the Ottoman Empire at its height. So it's important to understand the context of what Erdogan's working in, what his internal audience is thinking of when they think about their past. Just a few hundred years ago, they were involved in all these countries. Why shouldn't they be now?
And if there's a similarity about all these countries, is what? All particular religion?
In this instance, where they're expanding to now, Syria, Iraq, all Islamic. So just to give you a little bit of background, about 1,000 years ago, the Turks came to this region. They converted to Islam, and the first thing they did was to send all of their forces to, at the time, Constantinople, renamed Istanbul. In 1453, major important date, they took Constantinople, the heart of the old Roman and Byzantine Empire. That gave them the sense that they are the new Caesars. They're the new emperors. What they do after that, they expand into the Balkans. They take Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece. They expand against the Persians. They take Iraq. Against the Egyptian Mamluks, who are also Turks, take Syria, Egypt, Libya. Have all of this. And for centuries, they fight against the Western Europeans. This all changes. Colonial period, Western European nations expand slowly from 1700 to World War I. Ottoman Empire shrinks in size.
And by World War I, it's literally diminished.
By World War I, it's just basically what we see of Turkey today. Just a little rump in Europe and the big part of what we call Asia Minor or Anatolia. It doesn't include Syria, it doesn't include Iraq anymore, Libya no more. Just Turkey, where the Turks live. They don't have an empire anymore. They may want that back.
He's looking at Syria. He's looking at Libya. He's looking at a lot of these surrounding countries in what? We say create a new Mesopotamia, but essentially what he wants is to reach out across his borders.
Sure. You might want to say he's recreating the Ottoman Empire.
We have been talking about this topic a lot in the past about the relationship between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. Now we know, a few days ago actually, I was watching a video of Erdogan. He was talking in the parliament of Turkey. And he was mentioning something very, very interesting. But dear brothers and sisters, one thing that I have understood from his lecture, his story, I should say, is that Erdogan, he is the man to unite all of us. Wallahi, I'm telling you, he doesn't want any division. He's not a man of looking for some kind of like dominance over the Muslim world. He's not someone like that, not at all. If there is one man who can unite the whole Muslim ummah right now, is Erdogan.
Turkey wants to be powerful. It wants to revive its national pride. Flags are a common sight, as are the images of two men. Kemal Atatürk. He is modern Turkey's first president, and he represents a secular republic. And then, of course, there's the image of the current president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Now, he wants to be the father of a new Turkish identity, one shaped by religious faith. However, Turkey remains deeply divided over what should dominate, secularism or religion. Unlike Atatürk, Erdogan is putting Islam first. He believes that religion ties the country together. That message is well received in the pious rural population. But Erdogan's critics say that he has misused last year's failed coup attempt to boost Islamic nationalism. What does that mean in practice? I'm about to meet a young AK party member in this mosque. It's new and financed by the government. Mohammed says that it represents what Erdogan calls the new Turkey.
This new Turkey is self-confident. For a while, we got used to losing, but now we know that we can win again. We can be strong and be a great nation because that's what we were in the past.
It's been more than a week since Turkey launched its military operation in northeast Syria. The US, EU and the Arab League have called on Turkey to halt the operation. a request Ankara has rejected. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has laid out his own conditions on how to end this operation.
Our proposal is that right now, tonight, all the terrorists lay down their arms, their equipment and everything, destroy all their traps and get out of the safe zone that we have designated.
Hello, Turkey's president has vowed to keep fighting in Syria until all his country's goals have been met. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is shrugging off international pressure for an immediate ceasefire, and the battle on the ground goes on.
Since we last spoke, the situation has not improved, quite the contrary. The number of IDPs, the number of people needing humanitarian aid, the number of people who are fleeing this area reaches 200,000, and the humanitarian situation just is very, very worrying.
In a press briefing, the Turkish president threatened to flood Europe with almost about 3.6 million Syrian refugees, and has called Egypt as a democracy killer. Listen in.
Ey Avrupa Birliği! Kendinize gelin. Bak yine söylüyorum. Bizim şu andaki operasyonumuzu bir işgal hareketi diye nitelendirmeye çalışırsanız işimiz kolay. Kapıları açarız. 3,6 milyon mülteciyi sizlere gönderir.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Tuesday snubbed Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi's criticism of the presence of Turkish troops in Iraq. Erdogan told a meeting in Istanbul that Iraq's Prime Minister should know his place, saying the Turkish army had not lost so much standing as to take orders from him.
Zira merkezi yönetime söyledik.
We have told the central government in Iraq that a second Kandil is being established in the Sinjar area, and if they can solve this issue, solve it.
Turkish troops have been training forces in northern Iraq in preparation for an offensive to retake the city of Mosul from Daesh. The push could begin within days. The presence of Turkish troops in Iraq has been a source of tension between Ankara and Baghdad.
Elsewhere, Turkey has begun deploying its soldiers to Libya. That comes days after the country's parliament approved the move. The troops are to help shore up the UN-recognized government in Tripoli, which has been fighting eastern rebel forces. That eastern rival government strongly opposes Turkey's intervention.
According to the constitution, the internationally recognized parliament in the east should approve any deals with foreign countries, especially if it's a military agreement. Parliament rejected the deals with Turkey, which makes the deals annulled.
The parliament's decision might have stripped Turkey from the legality of sending troops to Libya. But it seems that the escalation will continue and that the parliament vote will not change anything on the ground.
For more on this story, here's our correspondent Jasper Mortimer reporting from Ankara.
Erdogan said today here in Ankara that Turkey is beginning to send troops, but he didn't say anything about how many troops were involved or how armed those troops would be. So we don't know if they'll be supported by tanks, helicopters, planes, or anything like that. America and the European Union have urged Turkey not to intervene in Libya. However, Turkey was angered by the collapse of the peace talks in Moscow on the weekend. It blamed the rebel general Khalifa Haftar for walking away from the peace table in Moscow and said this showed that he was only interested in a military solution. And earlier this week, Erdogan said, if Haftar doesn't get serious about peace, we will teach him a lesson that he deserves.
Involved with 7,000 miles away, so we want to worry about our things. We're keeping the oil. We have the oil. The oil is secure. We left troops behind only for the oil. And I have to just finish by saying that the president and I we've been very good friends. We've been friends for a long time, almost from day one. I just want to say it's a great honor to have you both, and thank you very much. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sayın Başkan, zaten biraz sonra çok geniş detay basın toplantısı yapacağız. Anlatacağım.
Well, Mr. President, thank you. In a few moments we shall be having a larger scale meeting. That's why I don't feel the need to come up with longer statements here.
The Turkish president has unveiled his new presidential palace amidst huge controversy. Opposition politicians have mocked the extravagance of the palace, which has 1,000 rooms and is understood to have cost more than €270 million. They say it's evidence of the president's autocratic tendencies. Environmentalists are angry that the complex has been built on one of the city's best preserved green spaces and that hundreds of trees were cut down. It was originally planned as a palace for the Prime Minister, but once Erdogan stepped down as Prime Minister and was voted in as President, the plans changed.
When Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and established its embassy there, Erdogan called a meeting of OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation. After the meeting, OIC declares Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine.
Peki, İsrail yönetiminin bu gücü nereden geliyor?
How can Israel dare carry out these crimes? Israel is well aware that the crimes committed in front of the eyes of the world will go unpunished. They know very well that there will be no legal sanctions over basic human rights abuses. A crime without punishment makes the criminal more brutal. That is the reason behind the rise in Israel's crimes. No peace and stability is possible in the region unless Israel is called to account under international law over murders and massacres. The only way to peace is the establishment of a sovereign and independent Palestine under 1967 borders with its capital in East Jerusalem, and there must be pressure on Israel for that.
We won't leave Jerusalem to the mercy of a child-murdering country. We won't leave Jerusalem to the mercy of a state that has no value other than occupation and plunder.
Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan is the only leader in the Muslim world who has the guts to criticize Israel-Trump policies. Erdogan openly criticizes Trump's Middle Eastern plan, calling it an attempt of Israel to capture Palestinians' land.
Bir yandan Kudüs'ün mahremiyetine el uzatan, diğer yandan Gazze'deki sivilleri insafsızca bombalayan, içinde medya gruplarının olduğu devasa bir binayı da bombalayarak yerle bir edenler, işte bu terör devleti İsrail'dir. Filistinli çocukların bombalarla ölmesiyle ilgilenmeyenler, İsrailli çocukların füze seslerinden korkması karşısında dehşete kapılabilmektedir. Şu hale bak. Halbuki çocuklar öldürülürken değil, uyutulurken sessiz kalınmalıdır. Şayet bugün Mescid-i Aksa'nın mahremiyetini koruyamazsak, yarın kem gözlerin Kabe'ye çevrilmesini engelleyemeyiz. Hele hele şu andaki zihniyetle hiç mi hiç engelleyemeyiz. İşte bunun için Kudüs kırmızı çizgimizdir diyoruz. Kudüs'ü tümüyle İsrail'in kanlı pençelerine terk etmek, sadece orada yaşayan Müslümanlara ve Hristiyanlara değil, tüm insanlığa yapılmış en büyük kötülük olacaktır. Mazlum Filistin halkına ve Kudüs-ü Şerif'e yaptıkları tacizlere seyirci kalarak İsrail'i cesaretlendiren herkes ortaya çıkacak vahim sonuçların sorumluluğuna ortaktır.
Meanwhile, Turkey is calling on Muslim nations to mobilize against Israel in the ongoing conflict with Palestine. Turkey's vice president wants the Islamic world to send a united and clear message to Israel. Ankara also criticized world powers for not doing enough to stop the violence. President Erdogan is a prominent critic of Israel. He described the country as a terror state after the storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque on Monday. Erdogan has repeatedly slammed Israeli occupation of the West Bank and its treatment of the Palestinians. Erdogan's deputy says that Muslim countries that do not display unity are effectively party to the conflict.